Good evening and welcome to the February 1st Town Center and Library Building Committee. We've been meeting now for almost 5 years, working on this project in one fashion or another. What our plan is for tonight is to go through a relatively brief presentation to kind of explain how we've gotten from there to here. We would very much appreciate questions. You know, our intent here is to answer people's questions. And once we get through that portion, we'll take a walk through the building. So you understand what we hope, you'll understand why we are where we are right now and what we intend to do. If the vote passes on town meeting day. This is our committee. I think we should go. Would you guys mind introducing yourselves?
Sure.
I'll do it for you.
I'm Amy Wardwell.
I'm Lori Dana. I'm on this committee, but I'm also the chair of the library trustees as well.
You know, I'm Jeff Forward. I'm a select board member and the chair of this committee.
I'm Josh Arneson. I'm town resident and town manager.
And, you know, we are a relatively small crowd. How would you feel about introducing yourselves? Would that, so like, you want to start, Matt?
I'm Matt Multrup, lifetime resident, probably fourth or fifth generation Vermonter. Born and raised here. I was just talking with Jeff, I went to elementary school here in the building, so it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to passing this information out for my family and colleagues that I work with as well. A lot of people that work around town.
Yeah.
I'm Darcy and I live in Richmond. And I also am a volunteer at Radiate and do a lot of work down there, and that's
great.
I'm Katie Millis. I also live in Richmond and I volunteer at Radiate, and I'm interested in this building and just the future of the town center and library.
Okay.
John Part, Richmond resident.
Dennis?
Dennis Watson. I've been here, since we lived here about 34 years. I thought here 40 years almost. Retired and interested in what's happening here.
I'm Mark Origines, was a town treasurer for about 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Until a few years ago.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the finances.
Good.
Matt Crabb, I'm one of the library trustees as well, and been here about 5 years, so looking to see what this is all about.
Great.
Catherine Wysocki Johnson, and I'm a visual artist. I've taught at Radiate and have volunteered for them. And also have brought classes from Mr. Godfrey's after school art program to Radiate. But I also am a frequent user of the building and just very interested in it continuing to be relevant to all people.
Great. And Judy, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Judy Bush, and I'm very interested in keeping the building alive and going, and I also very interested in supporting Radiate Art Space.
Great. Judy, you've been interested in this project for quite some time. We appreciate that. So we really appreciate you coming. I think that the entire committee, we've had several different iterations, but our intent here is to try to explain what we've learned about the condition of the building and what its issues are, what we've learned about what it'll take to fix those issues. And it's not insignificant. This will be the biggest bond that the town has ever done, and we're aware of that. We can't help that. But what we really want to do is we want to address people's questions. and try to answer them as best we can. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. We usually have public comment at the beginning of our meetings. Would anyone like to make a public comment? Okay, that's fine. It's not necessary. How we intend to work today is that we will do this this presentation, and then I hope to walk through the building. I think one of the most interesting aspects of the building is the basement, which Radiate's very familiar with. And Matt might be familiar with it from when he went to school here. I think it was a library down there, and the nurse's office, a couple of
Yeah,
bathrooms.
that sounds about right. Been a few years.
So let me see, let me make this work. There we go. And so this is the agenda we'll deal with for the presentation part of it. And as I say, we are definitely open to questions anywhere along the way. So this building was originally built in 1907. It was only half of the building at that time. And it wasn't an insignificant building when it was originally built. This was a big project for the town of Richmond at that time. Shortly thereafter, actually in 1908, there was a catastrophic fire in town that took out the entire commercial block, along with several other buildings. If you've ever seen pictures of it, it's really quite devastating. And what impresses me about this picture is shortly after that fire, the town folks felt it was important and necessary to build another not inexpensive building for future generations. And that's what we're in right now. That's what we're in today. The more recent history is the school district, I think it was 87, built the new school. At which time the school district owned this building, and then it was looking at what to do with it because it no longer needed it. And there was a group of people in town who really felt it should remain a public building. At the time, the town clerk's office was in the basement of the Masonic block up here, very small, ramped, kind of dismal space. And the library was there as well. And so there's a group of people in town who felt that this was a town asset and should continue to be a town asset and used for town purposes. So the library, I don't know if the library moved in exactly at that time. It might have been a little bit later.
It was later,
I think it was a little bit later.
1998.
Yeah. But the town clerk's office and the town offices moved into here in the late 80s. And not too long after that, the post office, which was in where the dentist office is now. That used to be a town clean before that, and then it was a post office, and they outgrew that space, and they were looking for a new space to put the post office. And the town put in a proposal to the U.S. Postal Service to use with the addition on the back of the building as a post office, and was successful at that. The post office is in and of itself a really vital town service in town. The surveys that this committee has done, businesses in town really value that this is a community hub, including the post office. And at the time, there was a lot of debate over whether post offices in specifically should just go for the cheapest rent someplace, or be part of the downtown communities. And if you look around, there are many towns around us that chose the former rather than the latter. You know, if you think of Shelburne, got to get in your car in order to get to the post office. Heinsberg, you have to get in your car to get to it. And they both used to be downtown, but they're an attractive tenant because they will sign a long-term lease. They will pay market rates up front, and they'll pay those same rates for 20 years. And that original agreement with the post office is what helped pay for the bond to renovate the building, the rest of the building, what do we call it, the second floor of the building, the floor below this for town office spaces, including the bulb. Today, it still is quite significant for the village, and they still pay quite a bit of rent. The rent now is up to just about $100,000 a year. And so this committee, when the supervisory union moved out of this space, they were in the third floor. When they moved out, they moved to
Jericho.
yes, it looks like Underhill, but it's really Jericho. You're right. It was an empty school that the district already owned, and they figured just to save rent, they would put it in one of their existing buildings, which vacated this space, and the select board formed this committee to try to figure out, well, what do we do with the building? What do we do with town services, for the long term? And it was an open question whether it would be in this building, on another building on this site, or somewhere else. And those are issues that the committee struggled with for, quite a while. What we determined is that this is a really good site for town services. It is not just the town center in name only. It is physically the center of the town, which is useful for, housing our town services. We determined that if we were to tear this building down and put up another comparable size building on this site, it would cost us many millions of dollars more than actually working on this building, renovating this building. So while our price tag is high, it would be higher if we determined that it would be higher if we were to tear it down. We kind of lose all of that embedded energy and start over again. I forget your Mark, isn't it?
Mark, yeah,
Okay.
we traded them.
Yeah.
We've been trading them. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to be the guy doing the devil's advocate question.
That's fine.
Without what do we do on the third floor now? With the supervisory unit?
This,
Okay, so what's on that second floor, wide open spot where we used to be? Like the select board, that big room down there.
it's where the planning and zoning is right now. So there are two offices in where the planning zoning office is in all of their files.
So how many full-time employees do we have working? We have 2 police and 3 down, or 4 down?
So it's me, Duncan, Linda, Adriana, and zoning. So that's at least 6 plus police, and right now police, we're budgeted for 4 plus a chief, but we're a little short-staffed there on that.
I mean, that's some of the questions that you're saying, the new building,
Actually,
the
one.
same equipment. Do we need the same equipment without the school here for the last 5, 6, whatever years?
So, I'll answer that if I can, and please chip in. What we felt is that our charge was to look at the town services for now and over the long term. The town has grown over the years, and our town staff has grown over the years. For example, we have an assistant town clerk, we have an assistant town manager, and those are relatively recent additions. We could see that there might be an opportunity in the future for the town staff to grow. That said, this is an available building in a really critical location. And we could not envision or imagine where else in town we could put town offices. And we determined that it would be more expensive to tear this building down and start over, regardless of its size, than it would be to reuse what has been determined is actually a functional building structurally. Foundation is good, the walls are good, the roof is good. Everything else, not so much, but that's not nothing. Those components are not nothing.
And Jeff, can I add that I think part of your question is the town services are on the second floor, but up here are our community cares camp, the Richmond Senior Center, the Richmond Historical Society, Mount Mansfield Community Access Television. So it's tenant space, people using this, nonprofits from the community as tenant space. And then we have Radiate using space in the basement. So
I just
Yep.
didn't know what.
yep, we have multiple tenants that are using the third floor in addition to this meeting space. And there's another conference room over there.
I mean, we've been at 4,200 people for 30 plus years. I don't think we're gonna be much more than a phone floor. I mean, nobody. Building.
Mhm.
So we're probably gonna be the same size for the last 40 years plus the next 40 years. It's a question of.
So, you know, what we are, what we felt was that we're not using the space very efficiently. You know, like there are two open offices right there. This office for our community cares was for the superintendent. Actually a really nice office, got windows on both sides. It is the quintessential corner office, but it's quite big for one person. The planning zoning office downstairs is two people for a room bigger than this, you know, our old meeting room. So it's not very efficient. Josh's space is no offense, but I think it's larger than it need be.
It's too big.
What this plan would do is try to utilize the space more efficiently, and therefore have more space, for example, the police department. The police department, the proposal is the police department to take up pretty much half this side of the building, which is about twice what it is now. Right now, that's one space I can't get into because it's secure. But it's really not a very good space at the moment. And that presents challenges with both recruiting and retention, which we have had like a lot of problem with recruitment and retention on the police department. Not entirely because of the building, but it certainly doesn't help.
How much of this building does the police department currently occupy? Like rough percentage wise?
It's about half of this space here.
Why don't we move on? And
Yeah, I
then,
think we'll get,
because I
some
think
of
when
these
you
might get
see the
answered.
design, things might get answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have done a lot of work. You know, we have learned a lot about the deficiencies in the building through building assessment, and since then, we've done you know, what I feel is quite a bit of public outreach. We had what, a year and a half, anyways, of public outreach. You know, trying to find out what people want to do with this building, what their hopes and dreams were, and what the needs were for the people in the building. You know, what were their space, both their needs and wants of what their space would be for the building. From that, we developed a lot of different plans, a dozen or so, and we hired an architect to help us develop those plans. And we reviewed maybe a dozen different plans. Some of them quite a bit more ambitious than what this is. So if we had accommodated all of the needs and wants of all of the tenants and all of the occupants of town offices, for like the police department, for example, it could have been as much as 4,000 square feet more than what we have now, which would be challenging, you know. So like the police department wanted a sally port. Sally port it took me a while to figure this out, but what a sally port is a secure place to bring somebody who you're going to detain in and take them out of the car and into a holding cell in a secure location. In order to do that, you need a garage. So if you think about a garage on this site, that's not so easy, right? And the police department is going to be up. You know, the second floor is half a story up. So trying to connect those two is difficult. You don't want to put somebody who you're detaining in an elevator very much. So that was a big challenge for us for quite a while, actually, trying to figure out what do we do with the police. And whoa, Heinsberg came in. And Heinsberg actually has quite a nice police department and quite a nice facility for processing detainees. And we're contracting now with Heinsberg to do that. So what we realized, I think, is that we don't need to do everything here. We can contract for services. We haven't processed a prisoner here in many, many years. Partly because of staffing, but also because the space is not great for it. It's really too small. We prioritized, we came up with use criteria to prioritize who the interested tenants might be in the building, and that's how we got the senior center, the Historical Society, Radiate, MMCTV. The post office, we consider the post office as similar to a town service, even though it's a federal government service. It's an essential government service. And so who is here right now is in large part because of the process that this committee went through. And we've been, all along the way, we've been looking for grants and alternative funding potential for this, for how we might fund this. We haven't been 100% successful yet. We've got a lot of experience applying for grants, and we intend to continue to do that if we go forward. It's harder to apply for grants if you don't know you're going to do the project, and we won't know if we're going to do the project until town meeting day. So our intention is to continue to explore grant opportunities after town meeting day. So as I mentioned, these are the current tenants: Post Office, MMCTV, Historical Society, Senior Center, Community Cares, and Radiate. And those are the town services that we have. And for example, the finance director would love to have another assistant. So like what this space would allow us to do is to grow if and when we wanted to. The tenant spaces are primarily office space. And if there was a need at some time in the future to have more offices, we could potentially take over, one of the tenant spaces. But right now, we're not proposing changing the tenant spaces, and we feel that's really a select board decision anyway, so not this committee's. So this is one way to slice and dice our budget. What we came up with was the way we got here is we settled on the floor plan design and the site plan design with the architects and engineers. And then they put that to a professional construction estimator who had something like 300 different line items to come up with that building construction number. Including the post office roof and the flood mitigation site work. Markup in insurance and bonds is our standard construction, estimates that are included in any construction project. Because this is an older building, it was recommended that we include a 15% contingency, which is not nothing. It's over $1 million. But once you start opening up, you don't know. But that seemed like a reasonable number to us. These miscellaneous, that $100,000, a lot of that is what it would cost. It's just an estimate of what it would cost to move people during the construction process. There's no question this will be a disruptive project. So we'll have to move staff out while we're doing construction. Not clear yet how we would do that. Once we hire a construction management firm, it would be their task to come up with suggestions on how we might do that. For example, you might do one floor at a time, shuffle people around, maybe. Hard to tell, but we thought it was important to include a dollar amount for that.
Jeff, can I go back to the design for the site and the building are conceptual, and we had to come up with something for the cost estimator to work with. So the interior wall position can be moved around. That's not what costs the money in this plan. So that is something that we would have to, if the bond passes, we would be going into the next phase, which would be construction drawings, specifics. And also the site plan is conceptual, where I know there's lots of trees in the pretty drawing. It might not be trees, it might be hedges, it might be flowers. lots of things that can be changed there. But again, we had to settle on something that we thought was approaching what the final plan would look like in order to have a number developed. So there's a lot of things that could still change: size of the police station, tenant spaces, how the walls are configured. Luckily, all of our tenant spaces are, as Jeff said, office space. And even the police station, the only thing that's specific to the police is that we have a locker room and a shower for them. And the locked cabinet where the armory is, but that's just a locked closet. It's not even anything special. So again, the police department, should our needs change, or we don't have a police station in some future, world, it's office space that could be rented to tenants again.
I think it's fair to say when we got this number, we went through, it took quite a while to get to this place. When we got this number, the committee was not happy. This was more than we expected. But in thinking it through and looking at all of the different components, we really couldn't tell what else to do. These windows are original, right? So they're 100 years old. There's 77 of them in this building. They're 8 feet tall. Replace those windows is a lot.
And they're single pane glass.
And they're single pane glass, and it's a lot. The ventilation system, such as it is, has no fresh air ventilation. None, zero. So the only fresh air ventilation that we have in this building are the leaky windows.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think that through, if you were to replace the heating and ventilating system without fixing the windows, you'd be heating the outdoor. And if you were to replace the windows without doing the ventilation system, you would be exacerbating the indoor air quality in this building, which is palpable. I'll show you why. But if you're going to be doing the heating and ventilating system, wouldn't you do the lighting? Wouldn't you would you put off doing a sprinkler system and do it some other time and go through that disruption at another time? Unlikely. So, what we felt when we started to tease this all out is one thing is connected to another thing. And while this is a lot, it would be a lot more if we did this piecemeal in phases. And it would be a lot more disruptive, over time. The impact on this is significant. It's we calculated it out at $96 per $100,000 worth of valuation. And that's based on a 30-year bond at 4.5% interest. I think that was your question, Mark. Is what
we were comparing to. And one of the things to know is this is not a $9.8 million project. This is a $17 million project.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for every, we're not paying cash for this. I mean, just as a comparison, we're a budget of like $4.5 million, asking for a $10 million bond.
Mm-hmm.
Burlington is a $105 million budget, building a massive school for $160 million. 1.6 versus 2.1. I'm not saying I don't, it's like, how do we pick up healthcare? I don't know the answer. Something's wrong with it. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm just here to point out, this is a ton of money for a really small town. Like a ton, like you said, it's the biggest bond, not even close that we've asked for. Again, I don't know what the right answer is. I just want to know, this is a $17 million project. It's not a 9.8, let's pay cash for it.
We have looked at alternative ways of financing this. One of the weird things about a bond is it comes with a fixed principal payment and a declining interest payment over time. So for a 30-year bond, it starts up here, and then in year 30, it's about half of what it was to begin with, which is nobody else borrows money like that, but municipalities do. Another way to approach it could be a loan, a note, a loan, which would be more like a mortgage, which wouldn't be, if it was for 30 years, it would be less over time, but it'd be about the same amount over that 30 years. If we did it for 20 years, that was a note, it would start up about the same place where the bond would, and it would be the same over that 20 years, and it would save about $2 million in interest. So those are choices. What we felt is that wasn't our place to make a recommendation one way or the other for the select board. This is a select board decision down the road. The earliest we would borrow the money would be fall, if we wanted to borrow the entire amount up front, which I don't know whether that's necessary really. Right, so if the bond passes in March, that construction document phase that Lori mentioned will take several months anyways. And that's necessary in order to go out to bid. And then you put it out to bid, and you get bid results in, choose which one that is. Maybe we guessed wrong. You know, maybe it'll be 9.2 million, not 9.8. You know, this is our best guess at this time. Or maybe we'll get some grants and over time we'll be able to reduce the amount of money that we need to borrow. We don't necessarily need to borrow the entire amount, but we have to ask for the entire amount.
This is my ignorance on financing, but how do you, if you got the bond for a certain amount and then you got a grant, I'm assuming the grant doesn't want to pay like the interest on your bond. They want to pay for whatever their grant is paying.
What we'd want to do,
So you have to get the grant before you take out the bond, the
that's what we
actual
would want to
bond?
do. That's what we would want to do, because then that would reduce the amount that we would need to borrow.
So are there leads on that, or,
Yep.
because that's a pretty short runway, I would think, just when I think about like grant writing and.
Mhm.
You know, I'll show you a slide on who we have applied to, and who we intend to apply to.
We actually convened a funders conference back in July. When was it? July? And Ben Doyle from the Preservation Trust of Vermont helped us convene it, and we had about 30 or 40 people. So we had people from the bond bank, we had people from Welsh's office, Becca Balance office. We had folks from the state ACCD who gives grants. We basically gathered together everybody who gives grants, Efficiency Vermont, and talked about the project. We didn't have a design at that point, so it was more conceptual, but so that they all know, so that they can feed into like, oh, there's a grant. Let's, there's a grant opportunity here. USDA was here. I don't remember who else.
Bond bank.
Yeah, the bond bank. And then we were able to hire a grant researcher through a grant that we got, so it didn't cost the town any money to have a woman work with us to try to come up with all the list of grants. She developed a project description for us that we can use in applying for grants. We have about 17 hours left of her time or something like that, so we can still use some of her time. So we have been really actively trying to pursue other money. It's just slow. And unfortunately, Richmond is not an energy burdened community. Richmond has a pretty high per capita income. So some grant programs like USDA grants, we don't even qualify for because of the sort of the shape of the town and the financial status of the town.
I mean, the bad news is that, we're not necessarily a good applicant. And the good news is because, and this is not everyone, but relatively, we're the median income in Richmond is higher than many. So like that energy burden question is, they calculate that based on median income versus what the average person pays for energy. So it's different in Richmond than it is in Winooski, like by a lot. So if the grant funders had their choice, they'd rather, give money to a more energy burdened community for that particular grant than they would to us. That doesn't mean that we won't apply, and it doesn't mean that we might still get it, but there are a few grant programs out there that are like that. The historic preservation grants What we've discovered is they're not very much relative to this scale. And they would come with really significant strings attached. So for example, if we got a historic preservation grant, we could not replace these windows, we would have to restore them. I'll show you what that looks like in the tour.
Yeah.
So are there other money questions that I can answer at the moment?
Yeah. The tenants that we have here, they pay a rent?
Some do, some don't. The post office pays about $100,000 a year. MMC TV pays about 15, and that's relatively market rates for the amount of space that each have. The senior center and the historical society don't. They have a lease. It's one of the things this committee established is that all of our tenants should have a lease, whether they pay or not. So that's, it's just a more administrative, correct. Radiate pays a little, I believe, like $400 a year or something like that. I don't think we have any other paying tenants.
No, OCC doesn't pay, right?
No. So, that could change, that a future select board could decide that we want to have paying tenants. For example, we might want to have a state agency have an office here. If we wanted to have a social worker in town, for example, I could envision a time when a future select board says, we really, instead of having an extra police officer, maybe what we need is a social worker. And maybe we get one from the state, and maybe that costs some money, or United Way or whatever. What we did when we went through the process originally is we opened it up. So what worthy either organizations or businesses want to rent from here, and from that we developed criteria that we thought was reasonable for the select board to use to evaluate proposals. And we landed on the ones we got. Sure.
My background is construction, so most of my questions are based on that.
Sure.
But when you dig into old buildings, I've done a lot of renovations in my career. Things just tend to sometimes snowball quickly. And I know you're taking into account some of that with that 15% contingency, but I'm just make a point that you never know what you're going to find when you start digging into stuff.
Agreed.
So, once you dig into the exterior of these walls, if the interior of that exterior is not what the engineer sees, from the exterior, could grow fast.
That's certainly a possibility. The team that Black River put together, I felt was really quite good. So Black River is an architectural firm out of Montpelier. We had engineering ventures that looked at the structure of the building, the rooms. We used that for good.
Watchman did the site plan.
But I mean, generally, do they do much exploratory demo to?
We did.
They did.
They were in the
And
ceiling. They were.
Post office. They climbed around, which is, I won't take you up there. It's terrifying.
They put a hole in the post office
They put
roof
a hole
to
in the
try to
post
figure
office
out
roof.
how it was actually built.
And what the size of the rafters were.
Badly built.
My concern is kind of this brick structure.
Yeah.
All the literature says it's structurally sound. But once have they opened up anywhere inside to see what those walls are on the exterior, to see what condition they're in?
I don't know what they did.
No, I don't think so. And there is not much evidence on the inside of, either structural or, we have over the years, we have done various energy improvements on the building. So the walls are insulated. The biggest problem is around the windows because they've got, weight cavities and the trim is really kind of beat up. There's
quite a bit of insulation in the roof now. That above here, there've been, I think, at least two different weatherization projects
that reduced our heating load by a third, when that was done. Other than that, this is the best we could come up with. We hired Breadloaf back in 2018 to do a complete building assessment, and the Black River team did as much as they could in order to come up with this number. So it could be wrong, we won't know until we actually
Get into it. No, I'm.
get into it. And the purpose of the bond vote is to set a maximum. And the reason why we didn't want to say, no, let's make it less, is because it's a much bigger problem. If you get, 3/4 of the way through the project, then you need to ask for more. So we thought this was quite high. And we felt it wasn't necessary to go higher than that right now, based on, what our experts are telling us.
Any of the operations here have to be relocated to construction?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Probably most of them. The good news, one of the silver linings with COVID is that we learned how to do that. And this is actually quite good. I'm on the select board, and we have many more people participating in select board meetings than we ever had before Zoom. It's really quite good. And our staff learned during COVID how to work remotely. It's not optimal, but it's better than not.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about moving the select board meetings to the library community room, for example. Just move this all over there for the time and not schedule, there are options. There are the little offices. Oh, there's 4 little offices in the library that we could. That is another town-owned building with meeting spaces in it.
About the post office.
That will be the tricky thing, and we would have to work with the postmaster to figure out what the post office would do, as well as the vault, being able to get Linda into the vault would be another tricky one.
Erin, who's our new postmistress, is aware of the plans, and the architects met with her, because when you see the design, we're actually taking a little portion of the post office that they don't use to put the mechanical room in that space, so it's not in the basement where it's not allowed to be. But and there's, the only reason Montpelier doesn't have the outside, it got too cold for them to work out of their construction trailers, but that is an option if our construction season is in the summer. So, but Erin, who is aware of it, and there would have to be more discussions with the post office
Definitely gonna have to be creative.
going forward.
You're talking 2 years probably before you break ground. If
Right, yeah,
everything
exactly,
Goes
yeah.
smoothly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, there's time to figure out where that.
Yeah.
Is it possible to see the designs? Because
Oh, yeah.
I
Move forward.
don't have any conception of what we're talking about
Okay.
yet.
Let's see if I can pull it up. You can do this.
Just.
Isn't it in the-
Let me see. How about this one? Doing it?
You just go forward.
Yeah, let's go forward and
You're still sharing.
Let me do this one. Let me start that.
Yeah.
Ah.
For some reason. I wanna
Oh,
show
you
you
didn't put the
slideshow.
handout.
I think you came in right after it.
Yeah.
They got handed out.
You got it.
Yeah,
no.
so
No.
you can
No,
kind of get a
on the
little,
screen now.
Right.
Oh,
it's kind of small. I know.
Can you escape out of your
Yeah, I'm getting there.
slideshow?
It's like all the outside stuff, site work, changing like the flow of the traffic. and
Yeah.
the hedge
You're-
tree. I mean, is that the 1.2
that's the,
million?
yeah,
Yeah, but you have to remember that,
Like needs and wants. Is that a want or a need?
So I think that's perceptive.
Yep.
So when we looked at this, the one warrant that we had in this proposal is the green space between the two buildings. Okay, so the reconfiguration of the parking lot and the green space is about half of that $1.2 million. We still have to do stormwater management. If we're doing a construction project on this site, you still have to do
Yeah.
stormwater management.
Back the flooding, the PVC.
Yeah.
pipe don't have-
Right, exactly.
But I was just wondering, like, out of that 1.2 million, I mean, it's.
It's about 600,000.
600,000. Yeah.
Years, 30 years.
Yeah. 600,000.
Out there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, do you need a 1.2 million to change it around when you're adding a 9.8
Well,
million unit bond already?
Some people would disagree that it's nice, but what,
Okay, adequate.
okay, and,
There's
you know, I mean,
It's,
I mean,
It's
it
added-
goes,
it's-
flows around, there's parking.
How
I
often
mean,
is
what
it
else?
full out there?
it's
right?
adequate, but it's not safe. And that's the issue that we tried to address. Right now, I can tell you that the library change, making it so people don't have to back out of the handicap spots onto Bridge Street and moving those slots over into the parking lot and having a handicapped ramp from the parking lot that anybody can use when those two handicap spots are full. I mean, that's the access to the library out of that parking lot and kids running across the parking lot has been an ongoing challenge, I would say. And also parking for moms with strollers, with people who use walkers, all of that kind of stuff would be made a lot easier. We don't gain any parking spaces, but we don't lose any parking spaces in this plan. It's exactly the same. And if you've ever been here on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock, it is full and people are parking on the grass. They're parking up in the driveway that goes to that back property and places that there aren't really parking spaces.
Just curious, what's going on
Kid-
Wednesday?
Kids story hour.
Story hour and at the same time bone builders at the church and there's no parking.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on. Monday and Wednesdays
If
are,
you're trying to
bad.
redesign,
Yeah.
why not try to add more parking? Because people, I mean, that's some of the things I've heard in the past, is
Yeah.
that there's not enough.
Yeah.
Part of it is some of Richmond's flood regulations and the lot coverage of how much we're allowed to have on this particular parcel. We can't add much to the
and there
parcel.
isn't much more to the
Yeah.
parcel. We do push, it does push
You're
back.
pushing the boundaries, I know, I see that.
It pushes back to the boundaries and puts a retaining wall so that we could put a few more parking spaces on the back side there and
So-
kind of makes it safer.
And some of the site work, so like the ADA accessible entrance to the library, those are actually some of the parts of the project where we might qualify for grant funding for the site work. We have
Yeah.
leads on ADA accessibility that could fund especially some of that, the
Yeah.
ramp building and the entrances,
Yeah.
so that might not be as much as it's budgeted for.
Yeah.
some of the subtleties,
Would those grants see more than that cost of that ramp, so to speak, you know what I'm saying?
yeah, we don't know. I mean,
Typically, you have to apply for the grant and give them the cost of the,
So
We-
said ramp. in this
yes.
case.
Well, we have a library grant that's just opened yesterday.
Oh,
Opportunity.
finally,
It finally opened $16.4 million from the Vermont Department of Libraries. And there were 240 people on the webinar thinking about trying to apply for the money. So, you know,
but some of the things that we liked about this plan that we thought that was worth keeping in, was that green space, in between, the sidewalk and the driveway and sidewalk are a crosswalk between the two buildings rather than having kids walk between the two buildings through the parking lot. It's actually, frankly, a little chaotic. One of the reasons that we can get the same number of parking spaces is because the design as it is right now is not very efficient. You know, you drive more than you park in this parking lot.
Yeah.
The way It's designed right now. We liked the movement of the handicap parking spaces. Right now, where the library handicap parking, you have to back out onto Church Street.
Yeah.
Which is, problematic. We would be putting handicap parking much closer to the buildings and on both buildings. The handicap parking would be behind the post office here, so you wouldn't have to walk through the parking lot. The handicapped person wouldn't have to walk through the parking lot in order to get into the building. And we felt that this was, frankly, one of the more attractive parts of the project. So
Mhm.
when all is said and done, this would really change how the village feels. Because we would have like a new park here. I kind of doubt that we'd have this many trees, but not, the site designer liked putting trees in.
I think Pete might have something to say
Pete might have
about the
something.
flowering part of the trees.
So, but, I think it would change how the downtown feels. Like, right now, the sidewalk on the other side of Bridge Street really changes. For me, it changes my experience downtown. Like, it much improves it from, an asphalt paved sidewalk that was broken down half the time.
Okay.
We should probably go into some of the other parts of the plan
building
or
part.
show people things because we don't want to keep people too late.
Yeah, so where am I? So I am having
Click
some.
on the
Most of my
next,
questions are.
there you go.
About the bill. Yeah, it's a lot of it will come up, I think, when you see the building too.
Can you make this full screen?
Don't know if I can, because I don't, oh, wait a minute, maybe I can.
Down on the bottom left.
Let me try that.
Yeah, bottom
Oh,
left is
yeah.
my color.
There we go. So let me try that if it doesn't please.
There you go.
There it is. That's a little bit better. So this is the floor that we're on right here. The blue part is what we're proposing is where the police would be. It's about twice what their space is right now. The rest is tenant space. We have it correct. I think they. I'm not sure.
The gold is the tenant space and the purple is meeting space.
Yep.
But this isn't the newest
I
plan.
don't think it is.
No.
But when the Radiate folks came into the select board to talk about this plan, what they requested was to label these orange pieces as tenant rather than specific, specific tenants. Because they, in theory, they could change. I think folks are happy with their space right now. And I think, the current select board is happy with that too, but, things change and we can't predict that. And we didn't feel our committee could make that decision anyways. The second floor, the green is all town services. We would get back our meeting room where the planning and zoning is now. The post office would remain largely the same, although there'd probably be some interior changes, would make it flow better. And the new mechanical room, if you build in a floodplain and you're doing a substantial project, you cannot have your mechanical system below the floodplain level. So you have to move that. So what we came up with is or what the architects came up with is building another mechanical room over in that corner of the post office. We're also including an enclosed stairwell. We'll show you what the fire escape looks like now. It's scary. It's a pretty rickety steel open structure, which is not code. We would be building an enclosed stairwell. And what that does is it allows us to take out the wall on the next floor down between the stairs and the town clerk's office, which when we go down there and you take a look at it, it really will change the feel of the interior inside of the building. It'll open up quite a bit. Are there any other salient features of this do you think of?
Because of flood regulations, we will not be able to have tenant space in the basement. The only thing that, again, can be used in a building in the floodplain has to be above flood level. So the basement.
Currently, that, right? There's no tenants currently. down
Radiate,
there.
that's where Radiate space is. So Radiate, would move upstairs in the building somewhere. So the only thing that can be in the basement is storage, and it, can't be anything that you would mind losing, when the basement
Can't store the
floods.
historical society's archives down there, for example, but yeah.
So in my mind, that's really dead space.
Yeah, we would be losing
dead space
Yeah.
because you can't really store, no one's gonna wanna store anything down there.
Well,
They do now.
you will go down, when we go down there,
See
you'll
what's-
see what it looks like.
But yeah, so that's, with, and this kind of goes back to, your point too, Mark, with, we actually would have less space for people in the building after renovation because we would lose that basement space for some tenant space, which is kind of, just the trade-off.
It's more expensive when you renovate.
Yeah.
Because you're in
Yes.
modern times.
Yeah.
now, So you need the modern ADA rules, which
Yeah.
we never worried
Yeah.
about before, the
Yeah.
sprinkler rules,
The
all that.
floodplain rule,
The
yeah.
FEMA rules.
Yeah.
Which when you have the
Yeah.
old building, you don't have to worry about, but going forward, they're not gonna let you touch any of that. Unless you modernize.
Where am I at?
Do you want to go back to the slide, Jeff, that just sort of highlights the the things that would be addressed?
I think it's
It's-
after
I
this one. Keep
think-
going.
And again, these are things that we can talk about when
I'm not
you
sure.
want to see the building.
what you're
I
talking about.
didn't we have a slide? It was,
Up above the question mark one, that one, I think.
That's the grant funding.
No,
Okay, so up
oh,
higher
so it's higher up then. Go back.
and I'm frozen up again.
Uh,
I don't know why I'm so.
Can you use the
Oh.
slider
it's,
bar?
it's in the FAQ document too, if people
Yeah,
have
yeah.
that, in front of them.
I think,
I think we should just do the tour because
I
I
think so
think all
too.
those things are
So-
gonna be.
so the question is, for us, like, what we're trying to do is we're trying to talk to as many people as possible. And explain what we've learned about, what the issues are with the building. What we see is the solution to those problems to the building. And answer as many questions as possible and be as available as possible to do that. We've done several of these tours. Tomorrow we're going to Friday Food Affair, for example. We're trying to hand these out to everybody that we can. And try to answer as many questions in Front Porch Forum as can. It takes me a little while to write those so that I can't do it immediately every day, but I responded to 3 today, for example. And the question we can't answer is whether or not, the voters can do this at this time. What, for me, for as long as I've lived in this town, I've wondered about the people who lived here before. When you look at the round church, when you look at the Universalist Church, which is now the library, when you look at this building that was built, after that catastrophic fire, there were people in town who invested their time, their energy, and their money in legacy projects. That we are still living with that legacy. Now, this is kind of our time. If we don't do this, we really have no other good ideas on what we should do with this building. We need a space for our town employees. We don't know of another good space. And as we walk through this building, that would be the question I would ask you. What else would you do? If we don't do this, what? Because we really don't have any good ideas on that. So, would you like to see it physically? So the first thing to do is look at this room. Okay, so, the reason the ceiling tiles are stained, and they're all throughout the building, is from the heating and ventilating system. It's condensation from the heating and ventilating system. And that's throughout the building. This ventilation.
Not a leaky roof.
It's not a leaky roof. It's, and that's throughout the building and they're really not great. The lighting, if you look at the lighting, they're all different colors. They're all fluorescent. If you were going to be doing a project of this scale, wouldn't you replace it with LEDs and up-to-date lighting? If you're going to be putting in a sprinkler system, if you're going to be putting in an HVAC system, wouldn't you do the plumbing, electrical, lighting, and fire alarm?
Will the ceiling, will you stick with the drop?
I would really like to do that as much as we could. It's not clear exactly how much we could do that, and some office spaces might want, a shallower ceiling in order for noise.
The good thing with drop ceiling is it's easy access to mechanicals in there later. So if you
Yeah.
have to get back up in there and repair something, you're not
Yeah.
tearing sheetrock or whatever you put up there.
Got it.
That's a good, big reason why they have these kind of drop ceilings in commercial.
Mhm.
The downside with it is that's an 8-foot window and you can't see it.
Yeah.
And if you look from the outside, there's this opaque panel at the top. And, I mean, this is an opinion, but, I think it looks like heck, I mean, and if you were to expose those windows, they were full height windows, it would get more towards what the original.
Is that gonna, like, on that respect, are you gonna order shorter windows? Because
No.
you still need to keep that mechanical space up there.
Or you change how the ceiling is configured. You don't have to use the ceiling grid for rooms that have a drop ceiling. And, frankly, I would like to go back up to the tin ceiling. We're not talking necessarily
But then
an
where are you
expense
gonna-
from one
where
of
are
the.
you gonna put those mechanicals?
It would have to be a different design, in many buildings, there's exposed mechanicals. That's a possibility. Those aren't like cost numbers, it's more aesthetic choice numbers. And
Yeah.
that's for the next iteration after town meeting. So like here, I can show you here, right here what the ventilation system is. In the building. It's right here.
Put a window. But it should be,
Right,
Yeah.
there you go.
right there.
And it's problematic, and so you don't, some places you have too much ventilation and some places you don't.
Some places the employees are wearing their coats in the winter.
Let's go out into the hallway. We still have Lisa Miller is on.
She stuck around, huh?
And
True.
if you have any questions, I'd be happy to
Yeah,
answer.
I just got a few here.
Mhm.
Like, I kind of hinted at the exterior, facade, so I'm guessing it's at least one layer of brick with a wood.
I believe that's
Wall.
correct. Yeah, I believe that's correct.
If you've insulated it, so it's kind of what I'm being led to believe, that's what the building structure is.
Yeah, I think it's balloon framed with a brick veneer.
Especially she'd see in the.
And there's a
photos.
space in between,
That's what, but, like, are you gonna like blow it out to where you're gonna see the inside of that brick? That far? to
We're not
strip the
intending-
walls?
We're not intending to, we're intending to leave the exterior walls as much as we can.
The sheetrock and everything in the interior finish?
Yeah, we're gonna
Okay.
try, I think
Yeah.
that's the intent. Is to try to, I mean,
Well, you're gonna have to rewire it, you're gonna have to open it up.
or, you could do molding and right now, that's. what we
Yeah,
have.
I guess, yeah, if you did wire molding on the surface. yeah.
And we could
But-
decide that.
My point is the brick facade, because we've worked on a couple old brick houses, we've actually moved a couple old brick houses. And the latest one, of course, we hired a moving company to actually physically
Yeah.
move it. We
That
didn't
must have been
sell,
really interesting,
But we
actually.
were working with them full time to make it happen. And we found that after we had moved it, of course, watching it being moved, and standing inside, you can see it swaying around and
Scary.
race the heck out of it
Yeah, really.
with steel and everything. But my point is we found out that all the brick needed repoint after it had to get moved. So, I mean, I was poking around outside, if we're going to that extent, there
There is an allowance for repointing.
for repointing?
For repointing the
Okay.
brick, and that's based
That's one
on
of those
visual
line
inspection,
items, right, yeah,
and
Okay.
both from Brett
They've
Luck
already
and
taken
from,
that into account.
and from the architect.
Okay. The post office roof, it's been put out there several times in Front Porch Forum and other areas that I've heard. I know, like you said, there's only an inch of insulation, like, is it, now you're saying it's not structurally sound, but it's been there since 53, right?
We wouldn't be replacing the rafters, we would be reinforcing the rafters.
Right.
So they
Yeah.
did look at the rafters and from the places that they opened up, it appeared to be okay, but The codes won't let us not reinforce it, you know.
Well, and it's a fairly shallow pitch, I
Yeah.
see. But what is the roofing there now? Is that a rubber roof, a standing seam,
It's a membrane roof.
rubber membrane?
Yeah.
Okay. So, got it.
And
But-
it's good that we're replacing it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
been
been
a
be
while.
every so often. Yeah.
It's been a while, and the mechanical equipment on the roof is beyond its useful life. Well, I've been praying that it's gonna last long enough.
With the post office though, I mean, when were those windows installed? Because you mentioned that those are gonna stay, or at
They
least
have
that's
been
what it
replaced.
says in here.
They have been replaced since 53. They are double pane windows.
Okay. It's-
From
Usually you get about 20-25 years out of a window, and then the technology's caught up and
Yeah.
surpassed what was there, and you can. If we're going through this whole problem or of upgrading everything, why not?
because
You
we
know,
bought 9.8 million.
I know,
Okay, so-
I understand that, but I'm just, you know, if you're already busting open that space, it's cheaper to do it now than it would be in the future.
And the architects were making the case that we should,
Yeah.
and,
Yep,
and,
so you've already thought about it, okay.
and they,
Just-
you know, so we felt it would probably be beyond as far as we could go.
Yeah, I hear you, I hear you. And this is kind of my pet peeve, so to speak, is I understand, I think it's great, you're trying to energy efficient the inside.
Mhm.
You know, LED, everything, that's awesome. But when it says all electric heating,
Mhm.
that's where a big red alarm goes off in my head.
Mhm.
Because I know I've been to a couple of the energy efficient Vermont stuff, and
Mhm.
they are hard pushing electrifying everything.
Yep.
And I've been to a couple of conferences, building conferences that they've hosted, and they can never answer me if the grid is gonna support that much demand in the future,
Mhm.
especially electric cars. You get as many electric cars as the state wants to put into, you know,
Mhm.
if the grid can actually afford it or support it. And also, it's also like my old house, I put a heat pump in.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's what you'll be looking at putting in.
It's a little bit different. So it's an air to water heat pump.
Yeah.
It's good.
But it's still a heat pump.
It is,
Still the
definitely heat pump.
same kind of
Yep.
technology.
It is.
And the problem with those is as the temperature drops, the less efficient they are.
That's correct.
And so you're still heating this big of a space. I know they're gonna size it, but heating this big of a space, when it gets to anywhere near zero or below, it's gonna be extremely hard.
Mhm.
And that, a lot of the newer ones, to combat that, it becomes an electric heater.
Yep,
Like
that's-
an electric baseboard heater, so
Sure.
that, your electric bill is gonna go through the roof. The town's electric bill to heat this, but I mean, it's gonna get more efficient because you're putting LEDs in and all that, but heating season, cooling season too, because now all of a sudden you've got this nice cooling system that hasn't been used before. Now you're gonna have to pay to,
We actually
Cool.
do cool this building.
oh, okay,
We cool this building now with, compressors that have been there for 15, 20 years.
so my point is, what's your backup? You know, there should be a backup system, and don't get away from the fossil fuels. I
Mhm.
know that's not the PC thing to say nowadays, but to me, fossil fuels aren't gonna run out. They may get more expensive, yes, because the politicians way up there pushing it. But don't get away from the fossil fuels. I mean, you go all electric, and I think the grid's gonna crash eventually. It's gonna catch up to us.
Mhm.
That's that's my research I've done, and like I said, the power, I mean, the Vermont Electric, Green Mountain Power were at these conferences, and I quizzed them, and they're like, oh yeah, they kind of gave me a BS, answer. They didn't really answer my question of can the grid really support it?
I was on the Vermont Systems Planning Committee, which is, organized by Velco, which is a transmission utility for the state, and that committee's role is to create the long-range transmission plan. And what we've seen over the past 10, 20, 25 years since Efficiency Vermont came into being is that our demand on the grid has not gone up. It's really remarkably, it has been, I'm not saying it will be in the future, but I'm saying that it has been remarkably stable.
Right.
As far as costs go,
Well, they
you know,
just started pushing this electrifying everything.
well,
So,
well,
I mean-
believe me, I used to, in another life, I worked for the
And-
regulators. And, you know, it's a conundrum for me,
Yeah.
this electric heat, because for the first half of my career, I was trying to get rid of it, you know? and-
Right, when we were growing up, electric anything was bad.
Yeah.
You know, propane was the, thing to use, And to me, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify.
So,
That's all I'm suggesting is don't throw everything into electric this and electric that,
so right now, so where we have come is.
And I know it's probably gonna add to the cost of, I don't know if it's they design a backup, so to speak, but.
We do not have included in backup boilers. Our boilers are about 10, 12 years old right now.
So they're getting up there.
They're getting up
Yeah,
there.
15, right, about what?
And if the big difference between using a boiler and doing this hybrid heat pump system
Mhm.
is the difference between a low temperature distribution system and a high temperature distribution system.
Right.
The boiler will put out water at 160 to 180 degrees.
Yep.
The heat pumps will be more like 120 to 140.
Right.
Which means that you need more distribution in order to adequately service the space. So this would be the time, if there's any time in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years that we if we get to heat pumps at any time, this is the time to install the distribution system that would handle that.
Right.
Whether to include in that boiler room, a backup boiler, is a possibility. It depends on what the budget comes in at.
I mean, it sounds like you're doing a hydronic system,
It is a hydronic
so
system.
you could easily have a boiler in there as a backup.
Mhm.
Or to help on those cooler days, or.
And I think that could be,
Power goes out,
you still need a, power.
you still need something, to keep the pipes from freezing,
Well, so what
Are you gonna put a big generator back there?
I mean,
You're
people would
getting
like,
back onto those fossil fuels.
people would like that, but.
And then you gotta, then you got the neighbor complaining because you got a generator running in your backyard and they don't have power, but now the town does.
Well, I'm not sure how often we haven't had power in the village,
It comes back on here pretty quickly.
so we have,
See, I'm on the outskirts of.
so.
Yeah, we don't lose it here
Yeah.
too long. It's gone out, but not for like a days on end. like
Right.
a few
You
hours.
know, and we are, a big piece of the project is tightening up the building, so if we reduce the heat load.
Yeah.
And,
Right,
and
right,
we-
you're gonna, because you're adding the insulation, you're fixing the windows, and you're gonna reduce that heat load.
and
And
it
you're
is
gonna save
entirely
money.
possible. I'm not
Yeah.
guaranteeing that there will be, no cold spots during any winter that we
Right.
have going forward.
Right.
But, on the other hand, if you look at the coldest days of the year, it's not really days, it's hours that are below zero.
You're right, it's getting better in
And
that respect.
oftentimes,
It used to be like a whole week at a time.
I know, it's getting more scary. from my
Yes,
perspective,
yes, okay, that's a better word for it, yeah.
And most of those times when it's the coldest are overnight, when the building's not occupied.
But that's also the worst because no one's here to monitor said systems. And that's something else you might want to put in because they do have freeze alarms, they do have.
I think it's a reasonable thing,
leak Detections and all
I,
that.
frankly, I think your expertise would be really useful during the construction process. We can't change the budget now, it's a fixed budget right now.
No, just-
But those change orders are not out of the question.
Right.
Depending on what it comes in at.
Yeah.
you know?
And I understand you're probably beyond, maybe not beyond this, because you're just asking for the bond or the
Yeah.
bond money.
Not to exceed,
But after that is when you actually get into designing everything, but part of that maybe is, hey, can we work in a boiler or something that we can have as a backup?
Mhm.
That can still be tied into all the electric stuff.
Mhm.
And then it's a matter of flipping, a switch or a valve or something so that that boiler can take over or help supplement that system.
and I don't disagree with you, and that could be a decision down the road. So far,
Okay.
where we've gotten to is we've been assured that we can do this and that'll work. But it hasn't been real decision and it hasn't been, and we haven't vetted it with everybody.
Right.
So,
Well, my power outage kind of doesn't really work there because the boiler also takes power to
right.
run.
Right.
It'd have to be a wood-fired boiler.
I would go for that. That was
Yes,
part of
I
my-
agree.
That's part of my career.
I agree.
But then Josh would have to go stoke the boiler and he might not want to.
Yeah, who would you hire to do that? Yeah, I got it. But, so yeah, those were my questions and, it sounds like you guys have thought, or someone has thought through most of that.
Yeah.
But, and to me, the big electrifying everything is a huge red flag to me.
And that's a debatable issue. I think that is a debatable issue. And frankly, I think all of these things are good to debate,
Yep.
And
I'm not against, electrifying stuff, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's
Yep.
what I'm trying to
Yep.
say.
So,
Because, Bird's Eye, I work for them. It's all very high-end residential. We put in backup systems for all our, the
Yep.
heating. It's not just one system.
and for a house, I would do that as well. I mean, I heat most of my house mostly with wood,
Right.
but I've got, a couple of propane space heaters,
Yeah, exactly.
But,
You know,
commercial building is different characteristics.
Yeah,
It's not occupied.
we're
100%
on
wood.
that cusp of commercial with what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all residential, but it's really close to that commercial by the level we're at up there.
Oh, I don't
Oh.
doubt that, but I mean, as far as how the building gets used is different.
Right, yeah, no, I understand.
Um,
And like I said, I did 4 years with Engelberg, so I kind of, but I was,
So right
at that
now-
time, so.
Right now, what happens is that, there are plenty of places in the building that aren't warm, right?
Right.
And so
You
they
took
bring in
the
the
next
little,
one tonight.
yeah, or too warm as the case may be, which I
Right.
feel like in this room right now, but
Well, and I can kind of see it by, there's no plastic up here, there, like the Linda's office, there was plastic in the old meeting room.
Yeah, that's
Those
mostly
were the,
because those are offices, so people are all the time.
Right.
And yeah, that old meeting room before we upgraded the heat in there, it was frigid.
Right.
and people will bring in the little electric space heaters, which I
Yeah.
hate, but
Done less of that lately, but yeah, it can get chilly with those crappy windows. 100%.
well, no, I completely agree that they need to be new windows.
Yeah.
That they shouldn't be, rebuilt or, those should be new windows.
so,
I'm a huge advocate
it's
for,
one of my primary interests, and it has been for 30 or 40 years since I've lived in them. I hate these windows.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize is you can't replace the windows without dealing with the HVAC system.
Right.
You're not responsible.
you
You
kind
make,
of hinted at that in your,
Mhm.
you really exacerbate.
well,
the
that's
air
why old buildings still standing now, because they were leaky.
Yeah.
That's the building sciences nowadays, if we're building such a tight building, they can't breathe. You have to put those
Mm.
air exchangers in now to allow your building to breathe or to be healthy.
Mm.
We're building them too tight, in my mind.
and I would take issue with that, not for this building, but to my mind, what needs to happen is you build it tight and then you ventilate it right. And having mechanical ventilation, like those heat exchangers,
Yeah.
where the air is coming in and where it's going out. And if you don't know that, then it can go through the wall and condense on the sheathing and cause you much more problem.
Well, yes and no. My house, I've got no insulation on the exterior walls. It's an old house.
Mm.
It's what they call a plank house.
Yeah, mine is
Oh.
too.
And I've never had, I mean, I've still got the original paint on my house.
Mhm.
Because it was lead paint.
Yeah.
I've since painted over it, but everywhere where I've insulated, that paint is peeling.
Hmm.
Because of that transfer. The heat from the inside of the house is not allowing that moisture to dry.
I agree with you, but you also need to look at the building as a whole.
Yes,
And if some of it's insulated and some of it's not, then you're not controlling the whole environment.
right. Well, I haven't got to that point yet.
Travis has been here.
Oh, yeah, I don't mean to keep you.
All
I'm
right.
just,
I
I can talk all night long with building stuff.
It's a passion.
Yeah.
I can
if you
tell.
could talk all night long, you're a good candidate for the select.
Yeah,
board.
that's true too.
And that's the way it's been.
Yeah, we're
going.
just getting warmed up at 9.
Yeah, oh man, that's not a good sign.
Yeah,
Lisa's all for it, I can see. She's still here with us.
She's watched quite a few of these, and she's gone on the tour. All the select board has gone on.
I feel like I should join in.
But I like doing these tours,
Yep.
because I think,
I can see.
Seeing-
You're passionate about it.
well, I am, and I've been involved with this building for, 30 years. So, and I've learned a lot through this most recent process. And,
And you've got an
Mike-
old house, you,
my question is like, if not this, what? If not now, when?
Right.
You
you do need to, and that's the part of this process is you need to have a maintenance schedule moving forward. And you recognize that.
I would really
Um,
like to work on that. It's
and
just that
that-
we've been busy on this.
Yeah, and that's something, it's not just this building, all the.
It's all of them.
They're,
We've done a lot with this
The
committee has done a
library.
lot with the library.
this
recently.
building, the town garage, I don't know, is the fire department, is that town property?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I mean, or is that, they maintain their own building? Or is
No,
that-
it's a
So I
town.
mean,
Well, then,
the town needs to look at maybe hiring one person to maintain all the buildings.
And then we need an office for them.
Well, you're gonna have the space.
Yeah.
And it could be a little 8x8 room,
Right.
I'm sure, or
When I was facilities,
someplace within the building for, a garage or, some tools.
when I was a facilities manager for the school district, that was my own,
Right.
there.
So-
So like, it doesn't need to be a
But
lot.
that,
You're right.
might be something, down the road is you gotta have maintenance for your buildings.
You do,
or-
absolutely.
Or you're gonna be spending 920 million to,
In large part, to my mind, in large part of why we are where we are is because it's pretty much 100 years of deferred maintenance.
well,
And,
my house too.
yeah.
The
And,
previous owners, they
And-
didn't do anything to it.
my house it was probably built around the same 1790s as what my house
Yeah,
was.
that's what we're figuring, 1790,
I'll bet you it's the same builder who built our two houses.
Well, coworker used to work at Liberty.
We gotta
Edge.
let him go.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
could just,
sorry.
There we go.
Lisa,
See you, Lisa.
thank you for joining.
Sure. Well, thanks for all the information. I learn something every time I attend one of these. So thank you, and let's get it over with.